His name is a synonym for wisdom, his wealth a legend that echoes across 3 millennia. We see him in our mind's eye as the perfect king, robed in gold, presiding over a court of unparalleled peace and prosperity. A poet, a philosopher, a master builder, and a vessel of divine insight. King Solomon, the son of David, the man who asked God not for riches or power, but for an understanding heart, and in return was given all 3 in measures that defied imagination. He is the man of the Golden Age, the builder of the Temple of God in Jerusalem, a house of cedar, gold, and stone that anchored heaven to earth. He is the sage of the famous judgment, who discerned the heart of a true mother by threatening to split a child in 2. He is the host who dazzled the Queen of Sheba, whose own vast wealth looked pale in comparison to the sheer, breathtaking opulence of his court. The story of Solomon is, by all accounts, the story of the ultimate success. It is the archetype of the enlightened monarch, the philosopher king. But this story, this beautifully curated, half-true legend, is a lie. Or rather, it is a gilded mask hiding a far more terrifying, more relevant, and more tragic face. The real story of King Solomon is not a story of success. It is, perhaps, history's most profound and devastating case study in failure. It is a tragedy, an 8,000-word epic that charts the decay of a single soul, and with it, the shattering of a kingdom. It is a story that proves that wisdom in itself is not enough, that wealth is a trap, that power is a corrosive, and that the seeds of our own destruction are often planted on the day of our greatest triumph. We are not here to praise Solomon. We are here to perform an autopsy. Because buried within the ruins of his golden age are 3 brutal, timeless lessons in leadership. Lessons so harsh, so tànkhok, that they are rarely spoken. Lessons about the dark side of a grand vision. Lessons about the slow, suicidal creep of compromise. And lessons about the soul-crushing emptiness of having it all. These are not the lessons we want from Solomon, but they are the lessons we need. This is why King Solomon was actually a failure, and the 3 brutal lessons that his downfall teaches us all. Before we can understand the failure, we must respect the myth. And the myth of Solomon is unparalleled. He inherited a kingdom forged in the fire of his father, David. David was the warrior, the fugitive, the man of blood and song who had clawed the tribes of Israel out of chaos and unified them. But it was a kingdom of raw, unstable potential. It fell to Solomon to refine it, to institutionalize it, to build it into an empire. And build he did. He was a master of diplomacy and trade. His ships sailed from Tarshish to Ophir, returning laden with gold, silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. The scripture tells us in 1 Kings 10 that Solomon surpassed all the kings of the earth in riches and in wisdom. He made silver as common in Jerusalem as stones. He controlled the trade routes. He built a professional chariot army. He was not just a king, he was a CEO, a logistician, a globalist. And then there was the wisdom. The story that defines him. 2 women, 1 living child, 1 dead. Both claim the living child. There are no witnesses. It is a perfect he said, she said deadlock. The crowd in his court must have held their breath. How could anyone know the truth? Solomon's solution is not a legal one. It is a psychological one. Bring me a sword, he commands. Cut the living child in 2 and give half to the one and half to the other. It is a horrifying, brilliant, and deeply risky gambit. He doesn't test their logic, he tests their love. The false mother in her spite agrees. Let him be neither mine nor yours. Cut him in 2. But the true mother screams, "Oh, my Lord, give her the living child, and by no means kill him." And in that cry of self-sacrificial love, the case is solved. Give the first woman the living child. She is his mother. The text says, "And all Israel heard of the judgment, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do justice." This is the man, wise, rich, powerful, at peace. But this is not the whole man. This is the public relations narrative. The real man, the one who took the throne, is far more complex and far more dangerous. Solomon's reign did not begin with a prayer for wisdom. It began with a bath of blood. His ascent to the throne was not a peaceful transition. It was a brutal, Shakespearean, Game of Thrones-style consolidation of power. As his father David lay dying, his older half-brother, Adonijah, declared himself king. He had the support of Joab, the long-serving, ruthless commander of the army, and Abiathar, the high priest. It was a powerful, establishment-backed coup. But Solomon, supported by his mother Bathsheba and the prophet Nathan, had other plans. They enacted a counter-coup, securing the throne from the dying David. And the moment Solomon had the crown, his wisdom was put on display. But it was not the wisdom of a philosopher, it was the wisdom of a mafia don. Adonijah, his brother, was the first to fall. He made a foolish, veiled request to marry David's last concubine, a symbolic claim to the throne. Solomon's response? "Why do you ask? For him? Ask for the kingdom also for him. As the Lord lives, Adonijah shall be put to death this day." And he was executed. Next, Joab, the commander who had won David's wars, but who had too much blood on his hands and who had backed the wrong horse. He fled to the altar in the tabernacle, claiming sanctuary. It was a sacred, holy place. No one would dare kill a man clinging to the horns of the altar. Solomon's order to his general, Benaiah, was chilling. Strike him down and bury him. Benaiah hesitates, but he is at the altar. Solomon's wisdom is cold. He finds a legal loophole. "Strike him down," he commands, "that you may take away the innocent blood which Joab shed." He justifies the sacrilege, and Joab is cut down at the altar. The political threat is neutralized. Finally, Shimei, a man who had cursed his father David years ago. David had forgiven him. Solomon did not. His wisdom devised a cruel test.
he placed Shimei under house arrest in Jerusalem. "The day you leave, you shall die," Solomon warned. For 3 years, Shimei obeyed. But then, 2 of his servants ran away, and in a moment of panic, Shimei left the city to retrieve them. Solomon's spies reported it instantly. He summoned the old man. "Did I not make you swear by the Lord, the day you go forth you shall surely die?" Solomon asks, feigning righteous anger. He had set a trap, and it had been sprung. "Your wickedness, the Lord has returned on your own head." And Shimei, too, was executed. This is the real King Solomon, a brilliant, cold, and calculating politician. A man who, in his first acts, eliminated his rivals, purged the military, and settled old scores his father was too merciful to address. His kingdom was built not just on God's blessing, but on a foundation of terror, spies, and ruthless political calculation. And this is where our first lesson begins. Because this cold, brilliant mind, this man who could see every angle and justify every action, would soon turn this same ruthless efficiency towards his own people. The man who began his reign by executing his enemies would soon begin the work of enslaving his friends.
Every great leader wants a legacy, a grand project, something to point to. For the pharaohs, it was the pyramids. For Caesar, it was Rome. For King Solomon, it was a project of unparalleled divine significance, the temple. His father, David, had dreamed of it. He had gathered the materials, drawn the plans, and yearned to build a permanent house for the Ark of the Covenant, a home for God himself. But God had forbidden him. "You have shed much blood," God told David. "You shall not build a house for my name." That task would fall to his son, the man of peace. Solomon embraced this vision, and it was a glorious one. The temple was to be the center of the world, the anchor point of Israel's faith, and he would build it with a splendor the world had never seen. He forged an alliance with Hiram, king of Tyre, a master of industry. He imported vast quantities of cedar and cypress wood from Lebanon. He quarried massive, perfect stones. He overlaid the entire interior with pure gold. The craftsmanship was exquisite. It took 7 years of painstaking, holy labor. And in 1 Kings 8, we see the climax, the dedication. Solomon stands before the nation and prays one of the most beautiful, humble prayers in all of Scripture. "But will God indeed dwell on the earth?" he asks. "Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built?" The glory of the Lord fills the temple like a cloud. It is Solomon's greatest moment. The vision is complete. The myth is sealed. But there is a dark side to this project, a dark side we conveniently ignore, a question we are afraid to ask. How did he, in an ancient, pre-industrial society, build it? How did he quarry those stones? How did he transport those massive cedar logs? Who did the work? The answer is the first brutal lesson. He did it with forced labor. We get the first hint in 1 Kings 5. Solomon writes to Hiram, I purpose to build a house, and I will give you wages for your servants. Hiram's men, the Phoenicians, were paid. They were skilled, unionized labor. But what about Solomon's own people? 1 Kings 5, verse 13. Then King Solomon raised a corvée, a levy of forced labor, out of all Israel. And the levy was 30,000 men. Let us not sanitize this word, the corvée. It is a polite term for state-sanctioned slavery. He sent these 30,000 men, Israelite citizens, to Lebanon in shifts, 10,000 a month. They were not volunteers. They were conscripts, torn from their farms, their families, and their lives to serve the king's grand project. But it gets worse. The 30,000 Israelites were the lucky ones. They only had to work 1 month out of every 3. What about the non-Israelites, the Canaanites and Amorites who lived in the land? 1 Kings 9, verses 20 and 21. All the people who were left, Solomon conscripted for slave labor. And so they are to this day. He had 70,000 who carried burdens, 80,000 who quarried stone, over 3,000 foremen to, as the text says, oversee the people who did the work. This was not a joyful, volunteer-led community project. This was a massive, state-run operation built on the backs of a conscripted and enslaved populace. This is the tyranny of the grand project. And this is where Solomon's wisdom shows its first and most terrifying blind spot. He was a brilliant logistician, but he had zero empathy. He saw his people not as citizens to be served, but as human resources to be used. The projects were magnificent, but the human cost was devastating. And here is the ultimate damning clue, the tell that reveals his true heart. The temple, the glorious house of God, took him 7 years to build. Then, the Bible tells us, but Solomon was building his own house for 13 years. 7 years for God, 13 years for himself. His palace was bigger, it was more opulent, it was more important to him than the temple. The grand project was, in the end, an act of supreme hubris. It was never just about God. It was about Solomon. It was about his legacy, his name, his glory. And his people knew it. For 40 years, they toiled under this wise king. They toiled to build his temple, his palace, his fortresses, his chariot cities. They were bled dry by his taxes, which paid for his vast bureaucracy, his 1,400 chariots, his 12,000 horsemen, and the daily upkeep of his massive, consumptive court. They were no longer free citizens. They were cogs in King Solomon's great machine. And for 40 years, a deep, simmering resentment built beneath the surface of the Golden Age. The king, in his golden palace, surrounded by his philosophers and his gold, was deaf to it. He was blinded by his own wisdom. He believed his own PR. He thought his project was so glorious that the people must be happy to build it. He was wrong. And the moment he died, that resentment exploded. The people of Israel come to his son, Rehoboam, at his coronation, and their plea is heartbreaking. It is the cry of an entire generation that has been crushed. Your father, they say, made our yoke grievous. Now, therefore, lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke on us, and we will serve you.
They weren't asking for a revolution. They were just asking to breathe. They were begging for a little less wisdom. Rehoboam, a foolish prince who had grown up in the palace surrounded by luxury, had none of his father's political savvy. He consulted his young, arrogant friends, and his reply, it is the single most idiotic, disastrous line in all of political history. He returns to the people and says, "My father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions." And with that one sentence, the kingdom was over. The 10 northern tribes, led by Jeroboam, a man who had once been one of Solomon's own foremen of the forced labor, rebelled. "What portion have we in David?" they shouted. "To your tents, O Israel!" And they tore the kingdom in two. This is the first brutal lesson. Solomon spent 40 years building a legacy of stone and gold. He built a temple, he built a palace, he built an empire, and the moment he died, it all shattered. Why? Because he had built it on the backs of the people. He had treated them as tools, not as treasure. He was a wise leader who was too smart to listen. A leader's grand vision, no matter how glorious or divine, if it is built on the oppression and dehumanization of the people, will guarantee the destruction of the very legacy it is trying to build. The kingdom did not survive its builder, because the builder forgot who he was supposed to be serving. His wisdom built the temple, but his arrogance destroyed the nation.
Solomon's first failure was political. It was an external sin. He crushed his people with the weight of his ambition. But his second failure is far deeper. It is personal. It is spiritual. It is, in many ways, more tragic. If his first failure was the sin of tyranny, his second was the sin of compromise. And it is a failure that begins, as so many do, under the guise of wisdom and necessity. Let's go back to the beginning of his reign. He is a young king of a new regional power. He is surrounded by ancient, dangerous empires. To the south, Egypt. To the north and east, the kingdoms of Phoenicia, the Hittites, the Arameans. His father David had subdued them with war. Solomon would subdue them with wisdom. His strategy? Geopolitical stability through political alliance. And in the ancient world, how did you seal an alliance? You didn't just sign a treaty. You married it. You took the daughter of the rival king into your court. This sealed the pact, turning a potential enemy into family. It was smart. It was pragmatic. It was wise. And Solomon was the master of this strategy. His first and most prestigious marriage was to the daughter of Pharaoh himself, the king of Egypt. This was a move of shocking diplomatic genius. Egypt, a superpower, was now his ally. But he didn't stop there. To secure his northern border, he married princesses from Sidon. To pacify the east, he married women from the Hittites, from Moab, from Ammon. He turned his court into a living, breathing United Nations of political alliances.
He built a peace that was the envy of the world, a peace built not on bloody conquest, but on brilliant diplomacy. But there was a catch, a non-negotiable term in the covenant of his God. The God of Israel, Yahweh, was a jealous God. His first command was, "You shall have no other gods before me." His law explicitly forbade intermarriage, not for reasons of race, but for reasons of faith. For, the law warned, they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. Solomon, in his youth, his brilliance, his supreme self-confidence, must have looked at that law and thought, "That's for a weaker man. That's for a man who can't handle it. I am Solomon. I am the wisest man alive. I can manage this. I can compartmentalize. I can have my political strategy and my personal faith. I can keep them separate." He was wrong. The Bible in 1 Kings 11 delivers the most devastating, concise summary of a life's failure. But King Solomon loved many foreign women, from the nations of whom the Lord had said, "You shall not intermarry with them. Surely they will turn your heart away after their gods." Solomon clung to these in love. And then the number, a number so absurd, so grotesque, it proves the strategy had spiraled into an obsession. He had 700 wives, which were princesses, and 300 concubines. 1,000 women.
This was no longer about geopolitics. This was about appetite. This was about a man whose wisdom had become a justification for his own bottomless consumption. He was consuming wealth, consuming food, and consuming people. But the wives were not the sin. They were the mechanism of the sin. Because these women, these princesses from foreign lands, did not come to Jerusalem alone. They brought their priests, their traditions, and their gods. And now we see the slow, patient, and catastrophic suicide of Solomon's integrity. It did not happen in a day. It was a death by 1,000 compromises. It's the psychological story of the boiled frog. Imagine year 1 of his reign. He marries Pharaoh's daughter. A political necessity, his court agrees. She needs a small shrine to her Egyptian gods. What's the harm? It's just diplomacy. It keeps the peace with our most dangerous neighbor. Compromise number 1. The water gets a little warmer. Imagine year 5. He marries a princess from Sidon to secure the timber trade. She's homesick, she tells him. She just wants to worship Ashtoreth, the goddess of her people. It's just a small hill, his advisors say. It's a private matter of the royal household. It shows tolerance. It's good for trade. Compromise number 20. The water is now simmering. Imagine year 20. He has hundreds of wives. His court is a cacophony of foreign priests, idols, and rituals. The God of Israel is no longer the only God in Jerusalem. He is just the first among equals, the state religion. Solomon is older now. He's tired. He's busy. He's managing a global empire. He doesn't have time for theological purity. He just needs to keep the peace, at home and abroad. His Sidonese wives want him to come to the festival of Ashtoreth. His Moabite wives want him to honor Chemosh. "It's just a state visit," he tells himself. "I'm not worshiping. I'm just appearing, showing respect. It's what a wise leader does." Compromise number 500. He is being cooked alive. And then the final horrifying verse, 1 Kings 11, verse 7. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, on the hill that is east of Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the people of Ammon. Let us be clear what this means. Molech was not a minor deity. Molech was the god of child sacrifice, the god to whom people burned their infants alive in fire. The wisest man in the world, the man who had once discerned the heart of a true mother, the man who had received the wisdom of God, was now building with his own royal funds on the hills overlooking the temple of God a shrine to a demon who demanded the blood of babies. This is the end of the road of compromise. It starts with a smart political move. It ends with building an altar for a baby killer. The text says, "And he did the same for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods." His personal faith was not just compromised, it was gone. It was a hollowed-out shell. He had become a universalist, an appeaser, a master of ceremonies for a pantheon of horrors. He had gained the whole world, and he had lost his entire soul. And God, who had been patient for decades, finally delivered the verdict. The Lord appeared to Solomon a second time and said, "Because you have done this, I will surely tear the kingdom from you." This is the second brutal lesson. Solomon was wiser than God. He thought he could outsmart the divine command. He thought wisdom meant pragmatism, tolerance, and political maneuvering. He failed to understand that some things are not negotiable. He failed to understand that integrity is not a value. It is the container for all other values. And once it is cracked, everything leaks out. A leader who compromises their core, non-negotiable values for national security, for political necessity, for peace, for trade, will eventually lose both their values and the security they were trying to protect. His foreign alliances, his brilliant strategy, did not save his kingdom. It rotted it from the inside out. When his son took the throne, the allies were nowhere to be found, and the kingdom he had secured was so spiritually hollow and politically fractured that it shattered at the first sign of pressure. There is no such thing as a small compromise on a core principle. That is the slow suicide of the soul. We have just covered the political and spiritual failures of Solomon, but his third failure is arguably the most devastating, the personal, existential crisis of the man who had it all. If you are finding this deep dive analysis valuable and want more feature-length documentaries on the hidden lessons of history, please take a moment to subscribe and click the bell, It helps us create more of this content. Now, we turn to the final lesson, the confession of the king himself.
Solomon's first failure was political. He oppressed his people. His second failure was spiritual. He abandoned his God. His third and final failure, it is the most modern, the most terrifying, and the most personal. It is the failure of his philosophy. It is the existential crisis of the man who had everything, did everything, and found that it was all nothing. For this lesson, we must turn from the historical books of Kings to another book, traditionally attributed to Solomon, a book that is, without question, the strangest, darkest, and most unsettling text in the entire Bible, the book of Ecclesiastes. This is not a history. It is a confession. It is the private, raw, unfiltered diary of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. It is the sound of Solomon at the end of his life, looking back at his gold, his women, his palaces, and his wisdom, and weeping. The book opens with a cosmic sigh of despair. "Vanity of vanities," says the preacher. "Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." This one word, vanity, is the key. The Hebrew is evel. It doesn't mean arrogance or pride as we use it today. It means smoke, vapor, a breath, a puff of wind. What he is saying is, meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. This is not the voice of a wise and contented sage. This is the voice of a man in the depths of an existential crisis. This is the wealthiest, wisest, most powerful man on earth, screaming into the void. The rest of the book is his evidence. It is his great experiment. He tells us that as king, with infinite resources and time, he decided to conduct a scientific experiment to find the meaning of life, to find out what is good for the sons of men to do under heaven during the few days of their life. He is the first, and perhaps only, man in history to be able to test every possible path to human happiness. What did he test? First, he tested wisdom itself. This was his original gift. Surely meaning could be found in knowledge, philosophy, and understanding. His conclusion? I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is chasing after wind. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. He found that wisdom didn't solve the problem of life. It just gave you a clearer, more painful view of how broken everything was. Evel, smoke. Second, he tested pleasure, hedonism. If wisdom is pain, maybe ignorance is bliss. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure. He threw himself into it. He says, I searched how to cheer my flesh with wine. I acquired male and female singers, and the delights of the sons of men. many concubines. He hosted the greatest parties in the world. He drank the best wine. He slept with 1,000 women. He had everything a purely carnal man could desire. His conclusion? Then I looked on all that my hands had done, and indeed all was vanity and grasping for the wind. The pleasure was momentary, the hangover was existential. Evil, vapor. Third, he tested materialism, legacy, accomplishment. This is the grand project all over again. If pleasure and wisdom fail, maybe meaning is found in what you build. I made my works great, he says. I built myself houses. I planted myself vineyards. I made myself gardens and orchards. I gathered also silver and gold and the special treasures of kings. He looked at his palace. He looked at the temple. He looked at his treasuries overflowing with the wealth of nations. He was the greatest achiever in history. His conclusion, it is perhaps the most heartbreaking verse in the entire book. Then I hated all my labor in which I had labored under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be a wise man or a fool. He sees his son, Rehoboam, the arrogant fool in the palace, and realizes, I built this all, and he's going to get it, and he's going to ruin it. And that is exactly what happened. His life's work, all his achievement, would be squandered by an idiot. The realization crushed him. Evil, meaningless. One by one he ticks every box of human aspiration: wisdom, pleasure, wealth, power, legacy, work. And at the end of each path he finds the same hollow sign: meaningless. This is the third and most brutal lesson. This is the dark secret at the heart of Solomon's success. He won the game, and he found the game wasn't worth winning. He had all the whats. He had wealth. He had power. He had women. He had wisdom. But he had lost his why. He had lost the transcendent purpose that his father David had. David, even in his sins, was a man after God's own heart. He was driven by a passionate, all-consuming why. Solomon was driven by wisdom. And wisdom, he discovered, is just a tool. It is not a purpose. It is a how, not a why. The third brutal lesson is this: the pursuit of worldly success, even good things like wisdom, achievement, and prosperity as an end in themselves, is a trap. It leads not to fulfillment, but to despair. Success without a transcendent purpose is the coldest, most desolate form of failure. Solomon, the wisest man in the world, had achieved everything, only to discover that without God, everything is just another word for nothing.
The story of King Solomon is not a children's story. It is not a simple fable about being wise. It is a tragedy. It is the story of the man with the most potential in human history who squandered it all. He was the chosen one who failed, the gifted child who never grew up. And his 3 brutal lessons are not historical artifacts. They are a mirror. They are a timeless warning to every leader, every high achiever, every nation, and every human heart. Lesson 1. His grand project, the temple, built on the backs of an enslaved people, teaches us that a leader's ambition is a terrifying thing. That how you build matters more than what you build, and that any legacy purchased with the dignity of your people is a legacy built on sand. Lesson 2. His wise compromises, his 700 wives and 300 concubines, teach us that integrity is not a suggestion. It is the whole game. It teaches us that the slide into corruption is never a blowout. It's a slow leak, a series of pragmatic decisions that rot the soul until nothing is left. Lesson 3. His final confession in Ecclesiastes, his cry of vanity, teaches us the ultimate terrifying truth, that you can have it all. You can get the money, the power, the fame, the success, and feel nothing. That success without purpose is the ultimate failure. Solomon is the shadow self of every ambitious person. He is the warning of what happens when wisdom is divorced from love, when strategy is divorced from morality, when achievement is divorced from meaning. He began his reign by building a house for God. He ended it by building shrines for demons. He began his reign with a humble prayer for an understanding heart. He ended it with a cynical, despairing heart that understood everything and believed in nothing. The story of Solomon is not a blueprint for success. It is a post-mortem of a catastrophic failure. And the question it leaves for us, ringing across 3,000 years, is not, how can I be as wise as Solomon? The question is, will I learn from the wreckage of his life, or am I, in my own wisdom, doomed to repeat it? This is the central question. Of these 3 brutal lessons, the tyranny of ambition, the suicide of compromise, or the emptiness of success, which one resonates most with the world we live in today? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read them all.